This is the third time I'm filming this. At this point, for science, we're going as crusty as possible. Just got home from a sweaty, long day at work, poured myself a big glass of wine, and I thought, you know what I want to do with my evening? Film a video that I've already filmed twice before. I came in a little hot there. What I mean to say is welcome to my winter wrap-up. There's about 20 books in this list, I think. The silver lining of doing this a few times is that I've finished a few more since I filmed the first time. So now we have even more to talk about, which is great. I'll just slip it all in here because the first day of spring was just a couple of days ago. So now I can actually officially call this my winter wrap-up, otherwise known as everything that I read in December and January and February is all in this wrap-up. And we're doing a tier rank style because I asked on Instagram a week or so ago if you wanted to see a classic Noel rambly long form wrap up or a shorter style rapid fire wrap up or a tier rank. And a lot of you said a combo of classic style and tier rank, which is what I am happy to deliver to you, also being assisted by some alcohol. So it's just a recipe for success. So first things first, I'm gonna pop the screen up here and gonna walk you through all of the tiers, because basically I didn't want this to just be like telling you like a tier rank of my star rating for these books. I wanted it to be a little bit more deep, I guess, than that. So instead I have listed tiers for the kinds of people that I would recommend these books to. Hot girls, top of the list. These are the books that I would recommend to other hot girls. Hot girls in the like fun, quirky, self-aware, meee kind of a sense where, you know, the girlies that get it, like that kind of hot girl. And also my book club is Hot Girl Book Club. So these are not books that I necessarily picked for book club, but books that I think if you enjoy my book club, you would probably also enjoy these books. That's who I'm like recommending those S tier books to. And then the next tier is book people. I think if you read a good amount, if you intake a lot from book internet, then these are books that you could chew on and really appreciate. You know, people that read a handful of books a year or more would really tear into these kind of books and pick something fun from them. Just like a good like book lover classic is what we're going for here. Then under that is hip aunties. So these are the books that I would recommend to like your cool, eccentric, fun wine aunt. You know, she reads a book every once in a while. Sometimes it's nonfiction. Sometimes it's like a woo-woo podcast. Sometimes it's like a fun novel that like maybe you've never even heard of before, but you're like, that makes sense for my auntie to read that. That's the kind of vibe we're going for with hip aunties. Then under that I have cool coworkers, with coworkers slash friends in general, I guess. People outside of your book life, right? They're not necessarily people in your life that you would consider big readers. However, if they came to you and asked, hey, what's a book that you read recently that you think I would like? These are books that I would recommend to my cool coworkers and cool friends, where I would feel confident that they wouldn't be intimidated, they would have a good fun time, it's not going to take itself too seriously, and it's not going to scare them away from reading. It's just a good ride, a good fun classic reader time to try and suck them into reading more and more books, you know? And then finally on the bottom of the list we have
the chats.
These are the books that I necessarily did not enjoy and did not get much out of, and maybe a Chad would like them. Someone who wants to feel intellectual or say that they read a certain book just for the clout of it. Maybe a Chad like on a dating app that says that he reads purely to impress women or people that are book lovers. That's the books that are going there. I don't think it's going to be very many of them, but a handful of these I already know are going to fit right in perfectly to that category. Okay, let's do it. These are in no particular order. I kind of scrambled them up a little bit because it originally put them in alphabetical order. So it's not in a timeline order, it's not in a star order, it's just vibes. It's just vibes. So first I am starting with the Alice Network. I don't know. I rated this a 4 stars, and I read it because I loved Kate Quinn's most recent release, The Rose Code, last year. The Rose Code quite literally changed my life and changed the way that I read and appreciate books, and I am not even remotely worried about overhyping The Rose Code because it was simply that good. So then I read the Alice Network thinking, oh my god, I'll read everything she's ever done, and the Alice Network is one of her most popular releases, and I was underwhelmed, to put it simply. I don't know, I just wanted more of the female spies being female spies and not so much of the contemporary-ish kind of vibes that we got between the two timelines. I'm in between book people and hip aunties. I think I'm going with hip aunties. It's very much so female forward, girl power, women doing their own thing and being loud and bold and unapologetic and telling their own story, living their lives, making mistakes, being spies. It's cool. Like, your aunt would love it. Next, I have One to Watch. Oh my god, this is an easy Hot Girls. I read One to Watch in December as a buddy read with my friend Nicole at Bon Bon Reads, and both of us, I think, loved it. Like, 5-star read. And let me disclaim to say that I'm not putting this in Hot Girls, and I did not rate this 5 stars because of the romance aspect. I understand why it's shelved as a romance, why it's talked about with other romance. I don't know how else you could really categorize it anyways, because it's a play on the reality TV franchise The Bachelor, Bachelorette, where it's this plus-sized fashion blogger who is pretty vocal about disapproving of the cookie-cutter types of people they continuously cast in these shows. And so the producers reach out and say, okay, then you be the lead this season. And she's like,
all right then.
That's the premise, and so of course it's based on this romance reality TV show. It's going to end up being a romance. However, I don't think that was the point of the book, and that's not why I gave it 5 stars. I gave it 5 stars because this was the most like smart and funny and punchy and raw kind of a read that was wrapped up to look like a romance. Like, it's like putting spinach in your fruit smoothie. You get a lot of good vitamins and minerals without really having to think about it or try too hard. I fucking love this book. It's mixed media. Didn't know that going in. No, I never hear anyone talk about that. So good. And the fun part of it being a reality show is that at one point I literally had no idea who she was gonna pick or send home next or anything. So if you like the Bachelor, Bachelorette franchise, you would like it. But also, it's just such good character work and gives you such a good like visceral idea of what it's like to be in a plus size body and live that body and live in the public eye and go about your life doing your thing and trying to find love and have people constantly telling you what they think about your life and what they think about your body, whether you ask for it or not. And it's, wow, so good, and I think people are sleeping on it or missing the point, and I'm not one to gatekeep and say like,
well, maybe you just didn't get it.
But also with this one, I'm saying that a little bit because I don't understand how you could read this book and be like, meh. Like, it was good, and I cried. I laughed, I cried, I had a good time, and I learned something. And what more could you want than that? All hot girls should read it. Oh my god. And then we are taking a quick pivot because the next one is Woman of Intelligence, and I hated this book. This is going in Chads, not because I simply hated it, but because I think a Chad would read this and think that they really did something for women by reading this book. This I had an arc of, and it was supposed to be, I think I read this probably short after the Alice Network because it's supposed to be about this housewife who misses her days working at the United Nations and kind of accidentally gets involved with the FBI and spies on like a known communist for the FBI. However, the FBI does not approach her because she speaks 5 languages and is like an educated and smart person and worked for the United Nations. The FBI approaches her because in college she happened to be sleeping with this guy. And they're like, oh, if you show up in his life again, he's gonna see you and remember that you used to sleep together, and he's gonna trust you with the communist secrets. And she's like, yeah, that checks out. And that's the book. Meanwhile, her life at home is like, her husband does not appreciate her, and her in-laws are like super overbearing and also just don't understand why she's struggling being a housewife at home with their child. And that was the most interesting part of the book to me, of her struggling to feel valued and feel seen and respected in her home life as a new mom transitioning out of being like a career woman. But even that was like bad. Like even that I don't think was handled well. So do not recommend this book except to your frat bro who's trying to get into someone's good favor by reading a book about like a strong woman. Yeah, this really did not work out for me. But you know, maybe it has its audience somewhere. I just don't think it was for me, or maybe not for hot girls. Next is Set the Page on Fire. I think I'm also gonna put this in Chad's because I didn't get almost anything out of this book. It's supposed to be this nonfiction book about tangible, no-nonsense writing advice for how to write and how to pitch and how to develop the habits to be a writer. And it was so ironic to me that this book that's supposed to be about no bullshit writing advice was packed with the worst cliches I've ever seen. Set the Page on Fire is literally the title and is also a horrible cliche. After page 20, I started counting how many times that phrase was used in the book, and it's outstanding. It's a huge number. Every time the author wanted to make a point, he would say, set the page on fire. Like, what does that even mean? I don't know. We never really unpacked it. Was there like a couple of good nuggets that I may reference or think about later on? Yeah, maybe. But overall, a waste of my time, and would recommend this to Chads who want to read a self-help book, but don't want to read a self-help book because they find that weird and lame and not very cool, and instead they want to read a book about some kind of craft to make them think they're being productive. And therefore they could read Set the Page on Fire and learn, I guess, some different phrases to inspire themselves about how to set the page on fire in writing and in life, if you will. Otherwise, don't necessarily recommend. Next is Blackout, and this is an interesting one. This is a collection of short stories by a bunch of different YA authors that all add up. It's like all part of the same story. I think I'm gonna put this in Book People because it's such an interesting like art piece to see all of these different authors, all successful in their own right, collaborate on this huge project and work together to write the same characters, to write the same setting, the same timeline. The whole book takes place over one day when this massive blackout sweeps New York City, and each different short story follows a different like black teenager or teenagers in that chapter, which is leading up to this big block party in Brooklyn at the end of the day. But each, of course, is by a different author, but like similar characters and things interweave between them. And it was really cool to see how they so obviously all like collaborated and worked on this. And I thought the character work was a lot of fun. It was just such a quick read. I think I read it in 1 or 2 sittings so easily. A beautiful book. I really had a good time, and definitely read it in the summer because it has like summery vibes, and I read it in like the middle of December, so maybe hold on to it for like May, June, July. Next one we have is Beasts of a Little Land. This I also read with my friend Nicole at Bon Bon Reads, and this was a pick for Hot Girl Book Club. I rated this a 5 stars. This book is outstanding. I think it's also going in Book People. I don't think that this book is going to be for everyone, and it's very slow paced and takes place, it spans like decades. Not that it's like long, it's not a slog at all. It was a quick read, and I was engaged the whole time. That being said, I put this in Book People because, especially if you read a lot of historical fiction, this is such an interesting and unique perspective on, one, just the point of views that we get from this time in history. We're in alternating POVs from a young courtesan in Korea, and also a orphan turned gang leader in Seoul, Korea. And the two of them kind of become friends, and you follow their relationship over the decades. And the whole time that we are seeing their lives unfold, it's also the peak of the Japanese occupation of South Korea and what that does to Korean culture, and the way that that puts tension and stress on the lives of Koreans and affects the two main characters in very different ways. And also just the fact that it's the author's debut is mind-blowing, like, on its own. This was so good, and book people who really love to sit and enjoy and like annotate and really spend like good quality time with a book, and not, rather than just like rushing through it to get to the next thing. That's no shade on fast readers. I'm just saying that this is a really good one to savor. Like I rated it 5 stars, and I wish I had taken a little bit more time with it, I think. Next is Breasts and Eggs by Miyako Kawakami, and this was our January pick for the Found in Translation Book Club, which I host with Brittany from Literally Smitten and Annie over at Annie's Book Nook, and we read a different novel in translation every month. This was our very first one for the book club, and I think this is gonna go in hip antes, because the theme of this book, that's told in really 2 parts, is all about women's autonomy, especially bodily autonomy, in modern day Japan. The first section follows this woman who is obsessed with breast augmentations, and she's constantly researching clinics and doctors and the procedure, and she's convinced that having breast augmentations would drastically improve her quality of life. It is a very fascinating first little part of the book, and the ending is bizarre and so weird and cool, and I loved it. The second part of the book is about another woman who wants to have a child and doesn't have a partner or a husband, and finds that it's a very, very difficult for any of the clinics or doctors to agree to in vitro procedure with her as like a single person, a single mother to be. So she starts seeking out these private like sperm banks, sperm donation banks. It really holds on to you and kind of gets under your skin, not in like an annoying way, but in a way that really, it sticks with you. I continuously think about this book. I rated this a 4 stars. It's going in hip antes because I think that your auntie would be able to relate, whether she has kids or doesn't have kids, or has had a boob job or has not had a boob job. I think that she would have a really good time with this book, and it'd be a really fun one to like discuss book club style with all of my cool hip aunties around me. It would just be a blast, just imagining that. Next on the list is If the Shoe Fits. And this is so interesting because it has a very similar premise to One to Watch, but this one I think is going to be the first in Cool Coworkers. I found this to be a lot more surface level than One to Watch, and I'm putting it in Cool Coworkers because it would just be such a good, quick, fun, easy one to recommend your coworker who maybe found out that you're such a reader and wants to get back into it, but you don't want to scare them away, especially when you find out that they enjoy romance, but you don't want to give them something too spicy. This book was like a 0 out of 3 on the spicy hot pepper rating, but I think I rated it like a 3 out of 5 stars on like the normal like ranking, star rating. But if the shoe fits, rather than being the lead, she's one of the like 20-something contestants in The Bachelor. And also, I didn't realize this until like halfway through the book, it's also a Cinderella retelling. I really liked that I didn't even pick up on that, because Cinderella as a trope is done over and over and over, and it can get very old. And however, I really, really liked the retelling aspects of If the Shoe Fits, which is another great reason that I think your coworker might have fun with this, because who doesn't know the story of Cinderella? All you'd have to say is, oh, it's a Cinderella retelling mixed with The Bachelor, and your coworker is going to be like, that sounds fun. And the bonus is it's like really short and easy and a good time. So yeah, give it to your coworker or your cool friend. Next is Austenland by Shannon Hale, and I never would have read this except for one of my students at the pole studio where I teach recommended this to me, and I said, okay, like I'll read a recommendation from you. Absolutely, I will. And so I got it from my library. It's so quick and so easy. The audiobook was like 6 hours. This is also going in Cool Coworkers. The premise of Austenland, I also found out there's a movie, so I'm going to be watching that with a bottle of wine probably one of these days very soon. The premise of Austenland is there's this theme park. It's like an immersive theme park where all of the actors at the theme park, or like actors, are hired to play like Regency, Jane Austen characters or archetypes, Mr. Darcy types. And our main character in Austenland, she has been not sabotaging her love life, but her love life has been a little bumpy because every single suitor that she meets, she compares to the idealized Mr. Darcy in her mind, and all of them just fall short of Mr. Darcy. So she ends up at Austenland. It's a hoot. It's a blast. It's a good fun time. There's apparently a sequel, and it's a murder mystery, which I'm intrigued by, and I will be reading, and I will be watching the movie, and I think your coworker would have a lot of fun with this, especially if they are the more like literature, but also like burnt out kind of a person. Yeah, you know, someone who like read a lot of books in college, or maybe like your English major friend who just wants something like chill and fun to relax into with no pressure. That's Austenland for you. And next is Credence. And I originally didn't have this on the list because this is the one I most recently finished. Oh God, where do I put Credence? I don't want to put it in Chad's. I did rate Credence 2 stars, and I'm sorry for that. It was on a really good, we were on a really good 3-star trail. Until the last maybe 30 pages or so, I really thought Credence fell apart. So I don't want to put it in Chad's because it's not written for Chad's. It's written for the hot girlies. It just didn't necessarily work for me. I'm not going to recommend it to book people in general. I think this would be a little bit too much for your auntie. So I'm going to put it in Coworkers. But you have to you have to give a big disclaimer to your coworkers that it's spicy, and it's a dark, and it's taboo, and there's a lot of trigger warnings, because one of my main problems with Credence was all of the spicy scenes was dubious consent at best. So be careful, especially if you've also recommended If the Shoe Fits in Austenland. This is funny. I'm like looking at these 3 lined up is a little bit misleading because Credence is really in a league of its own. I also did not mean for that to be the romance category, but we're kind of there because I feel like romance is such a good intro into learning to enjoy reading again, because so many people are readers as kids, where they read for pleasure as kids, and then in high school and college you have to read books like all the time, and it's not necessarily fun anymore. And then after college, you feel like you need to be reading nonfiction books or self-help books to, be productive and improve your life. And it's not necessarily seen as acceptable to read romance books specifically, but even like fiction novels, I feel, is generally seen as less than cool. So recommending romance books to your coworkers that say, oh my God, I used to read so much when I was little, get them back into it. Get them back into it. Reading is reading. It's not a game. There is no hierarchy, and you're not better than anyone for reading nonfiction or for reading romance or for reading fantasy. And I didn't mean for this to become a rant, but I guess it kind of was. I told you I was in a mood, and this is just what we're going with. Next we have Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. This is an easy hot girls. This book took me by such surprise. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. I don't even know how to describe this book. I read this as part of Blackathon, and it's about this woman who is, she feels like on paper her life is like amazing, and she has her dream job, she has this great boyfriend, she has her own place and great friends and a good relationship with her family and grandmother, and one at a time things just get thrown at her, and you see this woman shouldering all of these issues in her life with a combination of grace and strength and such like human emotion. And it felt so real to me, where this is one of those books where I finished it and had to remind myself, oh yeah, that was fiction. Oh yeah, that was a novel. It was so good. People are sleeping on this book. People should be reading this book. It was, I really, really loved it. The next one, I forgot I read this. Okay, this is fun. We have In the Quick by Kate Hope Day. This is an arc that I had been saying I was gonna read like forever, and I finally got around to it. This is so fun. I'm gonna put this in Book People. The way that I would describe this is if Sally Rooney wrote feminist science fiction. Which take with a grain of salt, because I've never actually read Sally Rooney, and my entire basis for saying that is going off that this book has that thing where it doesn't use any quotation marks ever. So you just, it's very obvious like what is dialogue and what isn't, I thought, but that is a thing. So if that turns you off of Sally Rooney's writing, it's also a thing in this book. But I loved this book. I loved this book. This was so good, and even if you don't think you're a sci-fi reader, it's not really about it being sci-fi. It's just about this girl who becomes a teenager, who becomes a woman, who happens to be an astronaut, and you just follow her life. It's not really about her being an astronaut, it's just about her. And she happens to be an astronaut. Does that make sense? It's a weird line. Like that's a very fine distinction. I love being in her head, and she was such an interesting character, and I found her so fun and so refreshing. I don't think it was ever actually said on page, but I very much so felt that she was represented as a neurodiverse character. So huge fan of this book, and I have another one of Kate Hope Day's books on my TBR cart that, now that I'm remembering that I even read this, makes me want to pick it up even sooner, because the way that she writes accessible and interesting character-driven sci-fi was so much fun, and I think book people would really get a kick out of it, whether they are already sci-fi readers or not.
Yes?
Hello. Don't want to talk about it? This is the 4th attempt. Unacceptable! I hope I'm happy with this video at the end, because this is really getting to my little content creator soul, let me tell you that. Like having an idea, being like, yeah, let's do something different, and then having to do it again and again and again, that now I am 2 weeks late on uploading a video because of it, is a really good fun time and a great lesson for being a creator of any kind, because I want to keep growing and improving my skills, and also I don't want to keep redoing a video 4 different times. So I think I'm going to pick this up on Dave Chang's memoir, which is where the last one cut off. Hee hee. Eat a Peach. This is staying in Hip Aunties, where I put it originally, like right before I think I lost the clip last time. And this is one of the best memoirs I've literally ever read. It's, the audiobook is read by David Chang himself, and it is so good and so real, and I did not find him pretentious at all. In fact, I think it was a great breakdown of a celebrity chef in particular being super self-aware about what got him to his level of fame and all of the messed up shit that he did on his way there, and reflecting on it and having this awareness of like, you know, I'm not necessarily proud of the person that I was and the mistakes that I made, and I'm not going to try and justify them. I'm just telling my story because people have asked me to, and I really, really enjoyed it. You do not need to know anything about Dave Chang to like read it and enjoy it. He does a really good job of kind of explaining who he is and where he started and why he grew to the success that he did. But I had a blast. I already really admire and respect him, even though he, as he discusses, like has been through a lot of, I guess, controversy in like the celebrity chef world, which is not something that I thought I would be like really particularly invested in, but yet here we are. And I think that your auntie would love it because it is such a good like food memoir. And I think that aunties in general just have a good time. I'm really generalizing here, but I just feel like aunties have a good time with like good cookbooks and things about the hospitality and food industry, especially like this fancy Michelin star celebrity chef. So that's why it's in Hip Aunties, but I do think there is something for everyone in there. Trigger warnings for suicidal ideation and depression and drug abuse. So just be wary of those. Oh, Jesus. Okay, next is Shallow Waters, which I read with Jayla from Lala Loves Lit for my book club, Hot Girl Book Club. Neither of us liked it, but the live show was really fun. And there's some weird inside jokes that came out of the live show for Shallow Waters. I'm gonna put this in Chad's. I wish I would have liked this. I think I gave it a 3 stars. I'm putting this in Chad's because I think this would be a great book to get a Chad interested in and invested in reading about the time of the Middle Passage and slavery in the South and the Underground Railroad, because it has this mythology spin to it, and it really felt like The Little Mermaid meets Spider-Man, but drop it into that period in time, which was just kind of bizarre. So the mythology in Shallow Waters is like a retelling, reimagining of the goddess Yemaya, who is often depicted as a black mermaid, and she has developed this crush on this human man who gets taken along with his entire African village by this like slaver pirate ship across the Middle Passage. So Yemaya follows the boat all the way across the ocean, where then she becomes a human and meets all different kinds of people along her journey, and it just did not do what I thought and wanted it to do. I found it to be over the top and a bit sensationalized, which was so strange considering the subject matter, and it was really like dark and intense considering there was a lot of brutality and violence that went on. My favorite part about this, I know I'm a little bit long-winded on this, but I have many mixed feelings on Shallow Waters. My favorite part about this was the author's note before the novel. It was like a multi-page note from Anita Kopax about how she wrote this book directly channeled from the goddess Yemaya, which I thought was such a cool intro to the book, and so bold and just unapologetic, and I loved that she said, hey reader, you're about to read this fictional mythological novel that I wrote. However, know that I straight up channeled this from the goddess herself. So enjoy. Loved that. And I also watched a really cool interview with her talking about Shallow Waters and her intention and heart that she put into it. And I loved the interview. So I just feel very mixed about it, but you can give it to your Chad who likes Greek mythology as like an intro to something else besides Greek mythology, because that was my favorite thing about it, was like, wow, a mythological retelling that's not about freaking Aphrodite, that's not about Zeus, literally sign me up. But the rest of it was like, I don't know. I wish I had loved this book, but alas. Moving on. Next, I literally forgot I read this book. Next we have Questland by Carrie Vaughn, and I read an arc of this, and I think I gave this 3 stars. I'm gonna put this in Cool Coworkers, I think, because this is basically Jurassic Park meets Dungeons and Dragons, and there's this theme park gone wrong that they have to bring in this expert, a game and lore and like magical history expert. I can't remember what her actual like professor title is, but they bring her into this like theme park because they know that she's an expert like in all of these different things, and hoping that she can help this basically like military team get to the center of the theme park where there's basically been like a mutiny, and they can't safely open the theme park because the people running the theme park have like started infighting with each other, and so it's not safe. Really, really loved the idea, the vibe, the setting, the characters were really cool. Awesome PTSD rep with the main character. The plot though just felt very hollow and not memorable. I think it's a great and approachable entry to this kind of gamified fun genre for maybe your cool coworker or friend who plays D&D. I think that those kinds of specific people would really get a kick out of this. Otherwise, I don't know, it's not much to write home about, but for my fellow D&D and gaming nerds, it's a fun time. Okay, the next one, stay with me here, because Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, I gave this a 2 stars. I did not like this book. However, I think I'm gonna put it in Book People because I loved the way that it was written, the actual writing style, the really creative like nuts and bolts that Alice Feeney manipulated to tell this story. Loved it. Like under the surface of the plot, like everything under the hood, so to speak, was really, really cool to read about, and I think that any book lover would get a kick out of it for those reasons. The plot itself, as far as like a domestic thriller, did not work for me. I found none of the characters remotely likable or realistic or believable. Nothing in the plot felt remotely realistic or believable to me, and every single twist in this book could literally never ever happen. I felt like I had to suspend more disbelief for this book than any fantasy I've ever read in my life, which that does not add up. Suspending disbelief for a thriller is like, should not be that difficult. And for that reason, that the plot, the story didn't work for me, but the writing itself, very, very cool and very interesting, and book people might really love it, hopefully more than me. Next we have Small Country. This was another read for Found in Translation, and this book was just okay, I thought. And it takes place from the point of view of this child living through the Rwandan genocide. And I think I'm putting this in hip antes. It's a fictionalization of the author's childhood, which made for an extremely interesting and real and raw reading experience. And also it read very disjointed and choppy. I don't know. I also read the audiobook of this, and that was really not a good experience because the narrator would read these horrific, traumatic scenes as if they were reading like a grocery list. And I get that there's a fine line with audiobook narrators putting too much emotion into things, but the audiobook was very jarring listening to the way that it was told with what was actually being told. Was really confusing for me. So I think your hip auntie would maybe really enjoy this, although enjoy is like a strange word for a book like this, honestly. But get her the physical copy of the book, and tell her to take it slowly. I think I read this too fast, and audiobook was not the way to read this book. I wish that I could read like one chapter at a time and maybe annotate and really unpack and soak things into my mind as I go. So that would be my recommendation for your cool aunt. Next is Window Shopping by Tessa Bailey. This is a little holiday romance novella that I read with Manda for her romance book club Sugar and Spice back in like December. I don't know where to put this because reading it was fun, but also like I don't really care and it's not very memorable. Thinking about why I put the tiers as they are, like who I'd recommend this to, probably your cool coworkers, you know, even as like a holiday gift. This is a fun one, a very short one, pretty spicy, like it's a lot of spice. The really fun thing about this one was that it's grumpy sunshine, but the male is the sunshine and the woman is the grumpy, and I really liked that dynamic. And the smut was like pretty fun. So I don't know, it's like it was fine and fun. I don't think I'd read it again. It's not super memorable, but it might be a fun way to like kickstart a friend or coworker's romance reading. Okay, this is an interesting one. A Special Place for Women. I read this with Jan for her full moon book club, and this could be in a few tiers as well. I gave this a 3 stars. That's been the theme of my reading year, quite honestly. And
goodness gracious,
I have such mixed feelings about this book. This book, it's kind of culty. Like that, the point of the book is that it's kind of culty. It follows this journalist who goes undercover to infiltrate this secret society of women in New York City, predominantly like waspy, like wealthy, rich, white ladies in Manhattan, and it's just kind of like girl boss, white feminism, if you will, or at least that's what it seems to be, and she's wondering like, okay, is there actually something dangerous going on? Is there something more sinister happening? I really liked the main character. I really liked the exploration of spirituality and how often women's spirituality, especially like the new agey, witchy spirituality, kind of gets a bad rep, even though why are we looking down on women's spirituality when traditional religion has been so respected for so long? Like, just let them do what they want if they find it empowering. This book really wants to be witty and funny and smart, and I just don't know if I follow that. So I'm tempted to put it in either Book People or Hip Aunties. And no, I think this is gonna go in Hip Aunties, for a similar reason to Breasts and Eggs, because it's kind of got that like hashtag girl power message that I think like a hip auntie would really vibe with. There's a very interesting twist on the entire book, not necessarily like a plot twist, but just where you think the book is going is not actually where the book is going, and I found that interesting and also weirdly out of left field, which is kind of the point. Anyway, I'm definitely feeling more rambly today than any other day I've tried to film this, probably because I've talked about these books a bunch of times already. But I think I'm satisfied with the Hip Aunties tier so far. I think that's the one I feel most confident about. Okay, I have 2 more. The first one is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. And this, to me, I enjoyed. This was a 4-star read, but I also just felt like off-brand New York City Evelyn Hugo, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because I will take all of the Evelyn Hugo vibes that I can get. It's a similar vibe to Evelyn Hugo in that it's an old woman telling a younger person the story of her life, and you don't know why she's telling that particular person the story of her life until the end. And also, the story of her life is like this young woman in the roaring 20s New York City living her life and learning lessons and being a source of mischief and good party times. Was it fun? Yes. Is it my favorite? No. And what's funny is I cannot remember where I put this the last time I filmed this. So it is still fresh. Probably every time I filmed this, the tier list is gonna look a little different, which is hilarious to me. I think I might put this in cool coworkers actually, because I know that Evelyn Hugo has become such a thing on Book Talk. So this is really me saying, hey Book Talk, if you like Evelyn Hugo, try City of Girls also. Like, those are my cool coworkers and friends in this context, because it is fun, it is rowdy, it is a good fun party time, especially if you like Great Gatsby vibes. And I think this would be a good foray into continuing a coworker or a friend's reading after Evelyn Hugo. It scratches a similar itch. Oh my, last but certainly not least, we have The King of Infinite Space. This book needs more people to read it because I really, really loved this book. I think I gave this 4 stars. I read this in December for Hot Girl Book Club with my friend Brittany, and I'm in between Hot Girls and Book People for this. No, I think I'm putting this in Hot Girls because this book raised the bar for multi-POV novels for me. It's a modern New York City queer retelling of Shakespeare's Hamlet. So first of all, do I need to say more?
No, but I will.
The 3 POVs that we follow is Ben, who's Hamlet, Horatio, and Ophelia, or Leah, in this book. And each of the 3 POVs are so distinct and written differently and have different stylistic aspects thrown in that made it such a fun physical read. I actually read this about half and half on audiobook and physically, and both were very well done. It has different audiobook narrators for each of the 3, and again, the 3 POVs in the novel itself was so well done. It's really hard to explain, but for Ben Hamlet in particular, his POVs were so unique because the author uses this very creative technique of changing the font, doing strange things with the typeface, bolding things, like making certain words gigantic on the page. It's hard to explain, but the effect is a really, really interesting take on a neurodiverse protagonist on the page. Like, we're truly in his head, and you get such a distinct sense of what it's like to be in his head as a neurodivergent person, because we're also in 2 other POVs that are written so differently from that. And it was so interesting, and I loved it. And I loved picking up the Shakespeare references. Even though I know the story of Hamlet, the retelling was so much fun to see how it would play out with the characters. The twists and turns was a really fun time. I think I put this in Book People the last time I filmed this, and I have obviously since changed my mind. I think Hot Girls would really love this. Book People would also love this just because of like the Shakespeare and the cool writing and the multi-POVs, like I said. But I do think that more people need to read this, especially Hot Girls and Shakespeare girlies, because I think about this book a lot, and whenever I pick up another multi-POV book, I will be holding it to this bar because that's how cool it was. Okay, wow. So this is officially the end of this tier rank wrap up for all of winter, December, January, February, and half of March. Please let me know what you think of this video and this tier rank style. I want to get back into doing more regular wrap-ups and recent reads, but I also, even though it took me 4 tries, I had a lot of fun doing a tier rank like this. So I'm kind of in between, I want to keep doing more creative videos for me like this. Obviously, I'm not the person who invented tier ranking videos, but this was really different for my channel, and I had a lot of fun with it, and I learned a lot along the way. So I would like to keep kind of pushing myself to do new things like this. So let me know what you think. Also, let me know what you think about any of these books and if you would put them anywhere different. Also, if you made it to the end of this very long video, please leave me the number 4 or the 4 emoji in honor of the effort that I put put into this silly little video. I really appreciate you watching. If you want to follow my antics other places, I am very active over on Instagram at Noelle7pages, and I also update all of my reading on Storygraph, so you can add me as a friend on Storygraph. I really love that platform, and I also have a whole video setting up my Storygraph account, if that sounds interesting to you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are well, and I will see you next time. Love you, bye.